The year was 2024. Nestled in the heart of the American Midwest was a small, quiet town named Harmonyville. Nothing extraordinary ever happened here. Time seemed to drift by, much like the leaves falling from the grand old oak tree at the edge of town. But for a young man named David, Harmonyville was his entire world, his own personal Walden Pond. David was a bright, inquisitive student at the local university. He was about to start his final year, majoring in physics with a minor in history. His inquisitive mind was always buzzing with questions, always seeking answers to life's mysteries. David had a thirst for knowledge. He spent countless hours in the university library, poring over dusty tomes and complex scientific journals. He was particularly interested in the concept of time travel, fascinated by the theoretical possibilities and the tantalizing paradoxes. He often lost himself in thought, pondering the mysteries of the universe. David was a dreamer, a young man with his head in the clouds, but his heart firmly planted in reality. David was a young man of simple pleasures. He loved spending time with his family, going for long walks in the nearby woods and losing himself in a good book. He was a loyal friend, a loving son, and a model student. David was on the cusp of adulthood. He was excited and apprehensive about the future, eager to make his mark on the world. Little did he know, his life was about to take an extraordinary turn, a turn that would challenge everything he thought he knew about time, family, and the very fabric of reality. David's family were the heart and soul of his world. His parents, John and Mary, were loving and supportive. John, a history professor, and Mary, a librarian, nurtured David's curiosity. Their home was filled with books and lively discussions. They were a close-knit unit, bound by love and a shared thirst for knowledge. They spent weekends exploring museums, visiting historical sites, and enjoying each other's company. Sundays were for family dinners, board games, and sharing stories. They were a picture of ordinary happiness, a testament to the power of love and family. The following week, David was home for summer break. It was a scorching hot day. The sun beat down on Harmonyville, making the air thick and heavy. David decided to tackle a project. He decided to finally clean out the family garage. The garage was a bit of a mystery. It was a cluttered space filled with forgotten relics from the past. Boxes stacked precariously, covered in years of dust, hinted at forgotten memories and untold stories. Old furniture huddled in corners, draped in dusty sheets like ghosts of Christmases past. David started by sorting through boxes of old books, tools, and forgotten toys. He unearthed a vintage record player, a chipped china doll that had belonged to his mother, and a dusty box of his father's old college textbooks. As he delved deeper into the heart of the garage, he stumbled upon something truly extraordinary. Hidden beneath a faded tarp, tucked away in the furthest corner, was a strange contraption. It was a sight that sent shivers down his spine. It was a machine unlike anything he had ever seen before. It was a jumble of wires, tubes, and blinking lights, all housed within a structure of gleaming metal, reminiscent of illustrations he had seen in his physics books. It looked like something out of a Jules Verne novel, a fantastical machine that defied logic and reason. As David pulled back the tarp, a musty smell filled the air as if the machine had been disturbed after decades of slumber. He ran his fingers over the smooth metal surface, his mind racing with questions. What was this contraption? How did it end up in his garage? Could this be the answer to his dreams of time travel? The garage, once a repository of forgotten memories, was now the gateway to a thrilling, terrifying unknown. David stood there for a long moment, just staring at the machine. His heart pounded in his chest, a drumbeat of excitement and trepidation. It was as if he had stumbled upon an ancient artifact, a relic from a future yet to be written. He carefully moved boxes and old furniture, clearing a path to the contraption. It was more imposing up close, a tangled web of metal and wires that seemed to hum with latent energy. He found a dusty leather-bound journal resting on a shelf inside the contraption. Its pages were filled with his father's neat handwriting, equations and diagrams that made his head spin. David spent days, weeks even, poring over the journal. He neglected his summer job at the local bookstore, his usual routine of reading and walks forgotten. He barely slept, his mind consumed by the complex theories and calculations his father had laid out in such meticulous detail. The journal was his father's secret project, a lifelong dream to unlock the secrets of time travel. His father had never shared these aspirations with him, keeping his research hidden away, perhaps fearing ridicule or disbelief. But here it was, a testament to his father's brilliant mind and his unwavering determination. The equations were complex, rooted in theoretical physics and advanced mathematics. David struggled to comprehend the intricacies of quantum mechanics, temporal displacement, and the manipulation of space-time. It was like learning a new language, a language that only a select few could ever hope to understand. Yet, he persisted, driven by a thirst for knowledge, and a desire to unravel the mystery his father had left behind. The garage became his laboratory, the musty air thick with anticipation and the weight of his father's legacy. Section 2. The hum of possibilities. The machine awakened, sparking curiosity and fear. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, David made progress. He began to understand the principles behind the machine, the delicate dance between energy, gravity, and the very fabric of time. He realized that this was not just a collection of random parts, it was a meticulously crafted machine, a symphony of engineering and scientific brilliance. He felt a mix of awe and pride, realizing the depth of his father's genius. One sweltering afternoon, as David flipped a switch on the control panel, the machine sputtered to life. The lights flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. A low hum vibrated through the garage, a sound that sent chills down his spine. He felt a surge of adrenaline, a mix of fear and exhilaration. The machine, dormant for who knows how long, was awakening. He cautiously adjusted a dial, watching as a small gauge flickered and came to life. The air around the machine seemed to crackle with energy. He could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Was this real? Was he really about to embark on a journey through time? Doubt crept into his mind, whispering warnings of unforeseen consequences and the potential to unravel the very fabric of his existence. As the hum intensified, David felt a magnetic pull towards the machine. It was calling to him, beckoning him to step into the unknown. He knew the risks. He had read his father's warnings about paradoxes and the delicate balance of time, but the allure of the unknown, the chance to touch the past and glimpse the future, was too strong to resist. He was his father's son, after all, driven by the same insatiable curiosity, the same yearning to explore the farthest reaches of possibility. Section 3. The First Leap. A dizzying journey through time's corridors. David took a deep breath and stepped inside the machine. The air inside was cool, metallic. He felt a strange sense of detachment, as if he were no longer a part of the world outside. He strapped himself into the worn leather seat, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the controls. He had spent weeks studying his father's notes, memorizing the sequences, but now, faced with the reality of it all, he felt a surge of doubt. He double-checked the settings, his finger hovering over the activation button. What year should he choose? Where should he go? The possibilities were endless, terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. He closed his eyes, picturing the familiar campus of his university, but not as it was now, bustling with students and faculty. He wanted to see it in its infancy, a fledgling institution on the edge of possibility. He punched in the year 1924, exactly a century before the present day, and pressed the button. The machine shuddered violently, and a blinding light filled his vision. He felt a sensation of falling, a dizzying loss of equilibrium, as if the very fabric of his being was unraveling. He closed his eyes, his stomach churning, waiting for the disorientation to pass. When he finally dared to open his eyes, he was met with darkness. The humming of the machine had ceased, replaced by an eerie silence. He fumbled for a light switch and flicked it on. The interior of the machine was bathed in a soft, warm glow, but the world outside was no longer the familiar clutter of his parents' garage. He peered through the small porthole window, his heart pounding in his chest. Section 4, Lost in Familiar Halls. The university, but not as he knew it. David gasped. Gone were the drab walls of his garage, replaced by the crisp air of autumn. He was surrounded by towering oak trees, and glimpsed majestic brick buildings. He cautiously opened the hatch of the time machine and stepped out onto the dewy grass. He was a time traveler, a visitor from the future. He had left everything behind to see history unfold. Ghosts of the Past. Encountering the university's early days. The university bustled with a different kind of energy. Students huddled in groups, their conversations filled with the idealism of youth. David felt a pang of longing for his own time, but he was determined to make the most of his situation. He spent his days exploring the campus and attending lectures. He marveled at the sight of students in their tweed jackets and flapper dresses. He felt a strange sense of displacement. He was surrounded by the ghosts of the past. He wondered about their lives and hopes. He spent hours in the library, poring over old newspapers. He read about the aftermath of the Great War and the Roaring Twenties. He saw his university through the lens of history. It was humbling to witness these pivotal moments. But a profound sense of loneliness settled upon him. He missed his family and their laughter. He missed his friends and their camaraderie. The weight of his isolation pressed down on him. A chance encounter, meeting a young professor, a familiar face. David noticed a young man in a tweed jacket engrossed in a book on theoretical physics. The man looked up, revealing startling blue eyes. "Excuse me," David began. "I couldn't help but notice you're reading Einstein." The young man smiled. "Indeed, it is fascinating. I'm Professor Miller." The weight of history, the ripple effects of time travel. David, posing as a visiting student, engaged Professor Miller in deep conversations. As days passed, he noticed subtle changes in the present, like a fading photograph, realizing his presence was altering history. Trapped in time. The machine malfunctions, stranding David. Panicked, David rushed to the barn where the time machine was hidden. The temporal regulator was malfunctioning. He scavenged parts and worked tirelessly, knowing time was running out. A race against time. Repairing the machine, a desperate struggle. David sought help from Professor Miller, revealing the truth about his journey. Miller, intrigued, agreed to help. Together, they raced against time to repair the machine. The disappearance. A son vanished, a family shattered. John and Mary Miller faced their worst nightmare. David had been missing for days. The police found no clues. Their home, once vibrant, was now filled with silence and despair. Days turned into weeks, each one an agonizing reminder of David's absence. John threw himself into the search, while Mary clung to hope, plastering missing person posters and consulting experts. Their home was shrouded in grief, but Mary refused to give up. As the days turned into weeks, John found himself retreating into the solitude of his study, seeking solace in the familiar company of his books. John, haunted by guilt, realized his secret research on time travel might be responsible for David's disappearance. He decided to tell Mary the truth, hoping for understanding. When John finally confessed his secret to Mary, revealing the existence of the time machine and his belief that David had somehow traveled through time, she reacted with a mixture of anger, disbelief, and a flicker of desperate hope. Mary, fueled by hope, delved into John's journals and reached out to experts. She organized vigils and refused to let go of the belief that they would see David again. Section 5, A Glimmer in the Unknown. Mary found a glowing device in David's room with a cryptic message, "Don't give up hope." She rushed to John and together they felt a renewed determination to bring their son home. Section 1, The Professor's Son. A shared legacy, a bond across time. The lamplight flickered in Professor Miller's office, casting shadows on the book-lined walls. David's tale unfolded like a fantastical story, incredible yet impossible to dismiss. The young professor listened intently, his blue eyes reflecting astonishment and familiarity. "My father," David hesitated, the words catching in his throat. To speak of his father in the past tense felt like a betrayal of time itself. He dedicated his life to unlocking the secrets of time travel. "His journals are my only hope of getting home." Professor Miller nodded slowly, examining the intricate diagrams. "These are brilliant, revolutionary, but incomplete." He was on the verge of a breakthrough, I can feel it. A wave of warmth washed over David, pride mingled with sorrow. His father's legacy extended beyond their garage, reshaping scientific understanding. "He never told me," Professor Miller murmured, a hint of sadness in his voice. "We weren't as close as we could have been." His words echoed David's own regrets about their strained relationship. United by a shared legacy, the gulf of a century seemed to shrink. In that moment, they shared a bond across time. Section 2. Bridging the Gap. Two minds a century apart unite for a common goal. The musty air of Professor Miller's office was soon filled with the frantic energy of their shared endeavor. Days blurred into nights as they worked tirelessly, their combined knowledge spanning a century of scientific advancement, yet still feeling woefully inadequate against the complexities of time. David, armed with his understanding of modern physics and technology, found himself explaining concepts that were still decades away from being conceived in 1924. Transistors, semiconductors, integrated circuits. Professor Miller repeated the words, his brow furrowed as he attempted to grasp the building blocks of a future he couldn't yet fathom. "And these computer chips you speak of? They can perform billions of calculations per second?" David could only nod, marveling at his ancestors' ability to grasp the fundamentals of a technology that wouldn't exist for decades. There were moments of frustration, of course, when the limitations of their time and resources felt insurmountable. Spare parts were scavenged from antique radios and gramophones, wires spliced with a hope that bordered on prayer. Yet, amidst the challenges, a profound respect blossomed between the two men. Professor Miller, initially skeptical, yet ultimately open-minded, proved to be a quick study, his sharp intellect bridging the gap between eras. He deciphered the nuances of his future self's notes, identifying flaws in logic and suggesting alternative approaches with a clarity that startled David. Together they were a fusion of past and present, united by a common goal, and the legacy of a man who had dared to dream the impossible. The echo of footprints, David's impact on the past, a father's transformation. As they worked, David couldn't shake the feeling that his presence in 1924 was having a ripple effect, subtly altering the course of events. He noticed small changes in Professor Miller, a newfound eagerness in his lectures, a deeper understanding of his students' struggles, a warmth that extended beyond the usual professorial demeanor. It was as if, by witnessing his future son's love for knowledge and his willingness to risk everything for a dream, a spark had been ignited within him. One evening, as they took a break from their labors, Professor Miller turned to David, a wistful expression on his face. "You know," he began, his voice uncharacteristically soft, "I always thought I'd marry later in life, focus on my career, but seeing you, hearing about your life, it's made me realize that family is precious. That time is fleeting." David's heart ached. He knew the woman in the photo, a kind, smiling woman who would become his grandmother, a woman he would never meet in his own timeline. The realization that he had, in some small way, influenced his father's decision to embrace love and family, filled him with a bittersweet joy. He was a ghost, a traveler passing through time, yet his footprints were leaving an unexpected mark on the tapestry of history. A race against the chronometer. Can they fix the machine before it's too late? Despite their progress, a sense of urgency gnawed at David. The temporal regulator, the heart of the time machine, remained stubbornly resistant to their efforts. Its delicate circuitry, damaged during his arrival, defied their attempts at repair. He knew with a growing sense of dread that each passing day increased the risk of unforeseen consequences. He could feel time slipping through his fingers, his existence in 1924 becoming increasingly unstable. "We're running out of time," he said one evening, his voice tight with tension, breaking the silence that had fallen between him and Professor Miller. They were huddled over the workbench, the air thick with the smell of solder and burnt wires. The time machine, a jumble of wires and salvaged parts, seemed to pulsate with a faint, erratic energy. Professor Miller, his face etched with fatigue but his eyes still burning with determination, placed a reassuring hand on David's shoulder. "We'll get you home, son," he said, his voice firm despite the uncertainty that clouded his features. "Your father, he wouldn't want you to lose hope." The use of the word son, so casually affectionate, sent a shiver down David's spine. He clung to Professor Miller's words, to the shared belief that they could defy the odds, that they could repair the fractured timeline, and send him back to the future he so desperately longed for. But as the hours dwindled and the temporal regulator remained stubbornly inert, a terrifying question began to take root in David's mind. What if they were too late? Farewell, for now. A bittersweet departure, a promise etched in time. David, heart pounding, prepared to activate the time machine. The patched-up machine hummed with unstable energy. Weeks in 1924 felt like a lifetime. He witnessed history unfold. He bonded with his younger father. Now, the moment of truth. Repairs fueled by love had to work. Professor Miller stood beside him, hopeful, a reassuring hand on David's shoulder. "It's going to work," he said. "Go back to your mother, tell her. I'll see her soon." David nodded, throat tight. He couldn't speak. He stepped inside the time machine, secured himself, fingers trembling. He glanced back at Professor Miller. A silent promise exchanged. David took a deep breath and flipped the switch. The ties that bind homecoming and the enduring power of love. The world dissolved into a blinding white light, the familiar sensation of falling through a vortex of time engulfing him. He clung to the thought of his family, their faces blurry yet comforting. Then, as abruptly as it had begun, the journey ended. He was back in his parents' garage, the musty scent of oil and dust filling his nostrils. The garage door was open, a sliver of the familiar evening sky visible. He had made it back, he was home, and then he saw them. His parents, their faces etched with joy, rushed towards him, their arms enveloping him in a hug so tight it stole his breath away. He had learned the true meaning of family, the enduring power of love.